Today's episode takes us to Cedar Grove, a charming town in North Carolina, where a beloved baker's life was tragically cut short. As the investigation unfolded, it revealed a web of deceit, betrayal, and a shocking affair that you have to hear to believe. Olivia Liv Carter was a 31-year-old woman living in Cedar Grove, North Carolina. She was known throughout her community for her warm personality and incredible talent for baking. Olivia owned and operated Sugar Spice, a popular local bakery that had become a staple in the neighborhood. Her shop was known for its delicious pastries, especially her famous chocolate chip cookies and pumpkin spice muffins, a trendy treat beloved by millennials everywhere. Olivia had a loyal customer base, many of whom had been coming to her bakery since it first opened. She was married to David Carter, a 35-year-old financial advisor. They had been married for 5 years after meeting at a friend's wedding, and on the surface, their life seemed perfect. They lived in a cozy one-story home not far from the bakery and were well-liked in the community, with Olivia often donating cakes and other baked goods to local schools and events like the annual Cedar Grove Christmas Parade. However, in the months leading up to her death, Olivia had been feeling a growing sense of unease. She noticed that David had become distant, often coming home late from work and showing little interest in their marriage, even after Olivia, who had always dreamed of starting a family, was diagnosed with endometriosis, which made it difficult for her to conceive. Despite these challenges, Olivia remained hopeful. She threw herself into her work, often staying late at the bakery to perfect new recipes. In September 2019, Olivia was preparing for the busy holiday season. She had just begun planning the bakery's Halloween-themed treats, which were always a big hit with customers. But even as she focused on her business, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in her personal life. She tried to talk to David about her concerns, but he always brushed them off, leaving Olivia to wonder what was really going on. Olivia's friends and customers described her as sweet, generous, and hardworking. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to help others, and her warm smile was a welcome sight to everyone who knew her. Her death would leave a void in the community that would be hard to fill. On September 15, 2019, at approximately 7:30 a.m., the lifeless body of Olivia Liv Carter was discovered in the kitchen of her Cedar Grove home. It was a warm Sunday morning, and the town was just starting to wake up. Olivia's neighbor, Laura Green, a 56-year-old retired school teacher, was the one who found her. Laura had noticed that Olivia's bakery, Sugar Spice, hadn't opened on time that morning. This was unusual. Olivia's bakery was almost always bustling with customers eager for her famous cookies and cakes. Concerned, Laura decided to check on Olivia. She walked the short distance to Olivia's home, which was just around the corner from the bakery. When she arrived, she found the front door slightly ajar, which immediately set off alarm bells. Olivia was always careful about locking up, especially after a few break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood earlier that year. Laura hesitated but then pushed the door open and called out Olivia's name. There was no answer. She stepped inside and noticed a strange silence. The house was neat and tidy, except for the kitchen. As Laura entered the kitchen, her heart sank. Olivia was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The rolling pin, which Olivia always kept on the kitchen counter, was on the floor beside her, stained with blood. The sight was horrifying. The once warm and welcoming kitchen, where Olivia had baked so many treats, was now a crime scene. Laura was in shock but managed to dial 911. Her hands trembled as she gave the dispatcher the address and explained what she had found. She stayed on the line until the police arrived, all the while trying to hold back tears. Laura later told investigators that Olivia's face was so badly injured that she could hardly recognize her. When the police arrived, they found Laura standing outside, visibly shaken and in tears. She could barely speak, and the officers had to help her to a nearby bench to sit down. The neighborhood quickly buzzed with news of Olivia's death, leaving everyone in disbelief. How could such a kind and gentle woman meet such a violent end? When the Cedar Grove Police Department received the 911 call on September 15, 2019, officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The responding officers were Sergeant Linda Vega, a 42-year-old veteran with a reputation for being thorough and compassionate, and Officer Ryan Cole, a 28-year-old who had only been on the force for 3 years but was eager to learn. They quickly secured the area, setting up yellow crime scene tape around Olivia Carter's small, single-story home. The quiet neighborhood, typically filled with the scent of fresh pastries from Olivia's bakery, was now overtaken by the flashing lights of police cars and the hum of emergency radios. As they entered the house, the officers were struck by the eerie silence. The living room was untouched, with cozy furniture and framed photos of Olivia's wedding day displayed on the walls. But as they approached the kitchen, the scene changed dramatically. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now a gruesome crime scene. Olivia's body lay in the center of the room, her blood spattered across the white tile floor, and the rolling pin, a symbol of her love for baking, was lying nearby, covered in blood. Sergeant Vega's experience kicked in as she began to assess the situation. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Chairs were knocked over, and a mixing bowl had fallen to the floor, its contents spilled out. Olivia's apron was stained with blood, and her hands showed defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought hard for her life. Officer Cole took photos of the scene, while Vega carefully noted the details. The forensic team arrived soon after, led by Dr. Angela Thompson, 55-year-old with decades of experience. The team collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any other evidence that might help piece together what had happened. The medical examiner, Dr. Thompson, noted that Olivia had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her head, and the time of death was estimated to be between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. The brutality of the attack shocked everyone present, including the seasoned investigators. Outside, the news of Olivia's death spread quickly. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Many of them knew Olivia personally, having bought her baked goods for years. The sight of police cars and the knowledge of what had happened inside the house left the community in a state of shock and mourning. As the investigation continued, the police focused on gathering every piece of evidence they could find. They knew that the crime scene held the key to solving this brutal murder. They needed to find out who could have committed such a heinous act against a beloved member of the community. The investigation into Olivia Carter's murder quickly turned its focus on her husband, David Carter. David, 35, was a well-known financial advisor in Cedar Grove. To his clients, he was the picture of professionalism, calm, dependable, and trustworthy. He had a strong reputation in the community, often seen at networking events and charity functions. However, behind closed doors, David was far from every woman's dream husband. He was completely different now, angry with an insatiable sexual appetite his wife could never fulfill. David Carter was a man of secrets, deeply unhappy with his life and marriage. In the days following Olivia's death, investigators dug into David's personal life. They learned that the Carters' marriage had been strained for quite some time. Olivia's endometriosis diagnosis had not only shattered her dream of starting a family, but also placed significant strain on the sexual aspect of their relationship. David, who had once been an attentive and loving husband, grew increasingly frustrated. He began spending more time at work and less time at home, often coming back late at night, or even after unexplained absences of several days. Colleagues noticed that he seemed stressed, but David brushed off their concerns, saying it was just life stuff. The real shock came when police uncovered David's affair with Olivia's own mother, Margaret Ruth Breedlove. Ruth, who had re-entered Olivia's life only a few years earlier, was 48 and still possessed a charismatic charm and smoldering sexuality that her somewhat restrained daughter couldn't match. The affair had started as a harmless flirtation but quickly escalated into something much more serious. David and Ruth had been secretly seeing each other for sex, even having sex on Olivia's bed when she wasn't home. The affair shocked the investigation, painting a picture of a man caught between a troubled mother-daughter relationship and a tangled web of deceit. During his interrogation, David initially denied any involvement in Olivia's murder. He maintained that he had been at the office, working on a client's portfolio, and had come home to find Olivia already dead. However, as detectives pressed him about his secret sexual relationship with Ruth, David's calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that the affair had nothing to do with Olivia's death. But when detectives confronted him with evidence of his infidelity, including explicit text messages and naked pictures sent between him and Ruth, David's composure shattered. Police noted that David's behavior was suspicious, his answers were evasive, and he struggled to provide a clear timeline of his actions on the night of the murder. Investigators also found it odd that David showed little emotion when discussing Olivia's death, often speaking about her in a detached manner, as if she was just some dead person you saw on the news. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the crime, David's affair with Ruth provided a strong motive for murder. The pressure on David was mounting, and detectives were determined to get to the truth. As the investigation into Olivia Carter's murder deepened, police turned their attention to Margaret Ruth Breedlove, Olivia's 48-year-old mother. Ruth had a complicated history that raised several red flags for detectives. She had re-entered Olivia's life just a few years earlier after spending decades living a free-spirited and often reckless lifestyle. Ruth had moved from Oakland, California, to Cedar Grove to reconnect with her daughter, but her arrival had brought more turmoil than healing. Ruth was a striking woman who had always enjoyed being the center of attention. Even in her late 40s, she maintained a youthful appearance and a sexually magnetic personality that drew people to her. After giving birth to Olivia at the tender age of 17 and leaving her in the care of her own mother when Olivia was just a child, Ruth had spent years drifting from one job to another and from one relationship to the next. She had worked as a house painter in Oakland, where she was known for her bold fashion choices and colorful personality. Ruth's life took a dramatic turn when she joined a cult known as the Sunshine Family in the late 1990s, a decision that led her to lose contact with Olivia for nearly 2 decades. When Ruth finally resurfaced in Olivia's life, it was clear that she had not changed much. She was still the same flirtatious, sexual, attention-seeking woman she had always been, and she quickly became a disruptive force in Olivia's marriage. Ruth openly flirted with Olivia's husband, David, even going so far as to make out with him in front of her daughter. This behavior strained the new and already fragile relationship between mother and daughter. During her interrogation, Ruth was candid about her affair with David, admitting that the sex she had been having with David was, quote, marvelous. She described the relationship as a passionate, all-consuming love affair that had given her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Ruth justified her actions by insisting that David was sexually unfulfilled in his marriage and that she was simply offering him the excitement and fulfillment he craved. To Ruth, the affair was not just a fling, it was a deep soul-to-soul connection that she believed was meant to be. However, Ruth denied any involvement in Olivia's murder. She claimed that she had been at home on the night of the killing, watching Real Housewives and sipping a glass of red wine. Her tone during the interrogation was defiant, almost as if she believed that her actions were justified. Detectives noted that Ruth showed little remorse for the affair and seemed more concerned about how the revelation of the relationship would affect her than about her daughter's death. Ruth's lack of empathy in her affair with David made her a strong suspect, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime. Despite her claims of innocence, investigators were not convinced, and they continued to scrutinize her every move. In the investigation of Olivia Carter's murder, police also turned their attention to a third suspect, Daniela Calbra Hernandez Basco. Danny, 22, was a figure with a notorious reputation in Cedar Grove. Originally from Tamaulipas, Mexico, Danny had a long criminal record that included theft, assault, and drug-related charges. His nickname, El Calbra, which means the snake in English, was a reflection of his slippery, dangerous nature. Danny was known to be a rough and intimidating presence in the community. He had been spotted near Olivia's bakery, Sugar Spice, several times in the weeks leading up to her murder, leading to rumors that he was involved in some sort of criminal activity in the area. Witnesses reported seeing him lurking around the neighborhood, often dressed in dark clothing and keeping to the shadows. He was the kind of person who made people nervous, someone who always seemed to be on the edge of violence. When police brought Danny in for questioning, they were prepared for a difficult interrogation. Danny, however, surprised them by maintaining his innocence. He claimed he had nothing to do with Olivia's murder, and that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Danny, he had been in the area to meet up with some old friends from his neighborhood who had recently immigrated to the United States, not to cause any trouble. He insisted that he had never even met Olivia and had no reason to harm her. Throughout the interrogation, Danny's demeanor was defensive. He was angry and frustrated, lashing out at the detectives who questioned him. He accused them of targeting him because of his criminal past and his Mexican nationality, calling the investigation a witch hunt. Despite his protests, police remained suspicious of Danny. His violent history and proximity to the crime scene made him a person of interest. However, as the interrogation continued, it became clear that there was little evidence to tie Danny directly to Olivia's murder. There were no witnesses who could place him at the scene at the time of the crime, and no physical evidence connected him to the murder. While his presence in the area was suspicious, it wasn't enough to charge him. Danny was eventually released, but police kept him under close surveillance, aware that his volatile nature and criminal background made him a potential threat. As the investigation into Olivia Carter's murder dragged on without a clear suspect, frustration began to set in for the detectives. But on the morning of September 18, 2019, a breakthrough came when Margaret Ruth Breedlove made a shocking revelation that changed the course of the case. Ruth, during a follow-up interview with detectives, disclosed that she was pregnant and the father was none other than her own son-in-law, David Carter. This revelation stunned the police, adding a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web of relationships. Detectives knew that this revelation could be the key to understanding the motive behind Olivia's brutal murder. The news of Ruth's pregnancy was a bombshell, suggesting that the affair between Ruth and David wasn't just a fling but something far more serious. With this new information in hand, the police doubled down on their investigation. They decided to re-examine the crime scene and the evidence collected earlier, hoping to uncover any overlooked details. On September 20th, 2019, 2 days after Ruth's confession, detectives revisited Olivia's house, where the murder had taken place. Inside, the crime scene remained eerily untouched, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred there. The detectives carefully combed through the area, focusing on the rolling pin that had been used as the murder weapon. Forensic experts reanalyzed the rolling pin, this time looking for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that might have been missed during the initial examination. Meanwhile, detectives also turned their attention to David Carter. Armed with the knowledge of Ruth's pregnancy, they began to put together a timeline of events leading up to Olivia's murder. They learned that David had been increasingly anxious in the weeks before the crime, reportedly distancing himself from both his wife and Ruth. He had also made several uncharacteristic mistakes at work, which co-workers later attributed to his distracted state of mind. Could he have known Ruth was pregnant with his child? And could Olivia have known this shocking secret? The breakthrough came when detectives discovered a series of deleted text messages on David's phone, which they were able to recover with the help of digital forensic experts. These messages revealed a heated argument between David and Olivia on the night of her death. Here is the rewritten text with the updated names and locations. In the texts, Olivia confronted David about his affair with her mother, Ruth. The argument escalated quickly, and the final message from David suggested he was going to F her to death with this new evidence. The police had what they needed to tie David directly to the murder. The text provided a clear motive: David had killed Olivia in a desperate attempt to escape the fallout from his affair and Ruth's pregnancy. Hey, true crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. On the evening of September 21st, 2019, after uncovering the damning text messages and learning about Ruth's pregnancy, police were confident they had enough evidence to arrest David Carter. David, 35, was a successful financial advisor in Cedar Grove, North Carolina, known for his calm and collected demeanor. However, beneath the surface, he was a man trapped by his own secrets and sexual desires. His affair with his mother-in-law, Ruth, and the news that she was pregnant with his child had driven him to a breaking point. The detectives decided to approach David at his home, a modest house in a quiet Cedar Grove neighborhood. They arrived just after 8 p.m. when they knew David would likely be home. The air was thick with tension as they knocked on the door. When David answered, the TV was set to how-to videos about child raising. He appeared tired and on edge, a stark contrast to the composed image he usually projected. The lead detective, Sergeant Linda Vega, informed David that they needed to talk about new developments in the case. David hesitated but allowed them inside. The detectives wasted no time confronting him with the evidence: the recovered text messages, Ruth's pregnancy, and the clear motive that had emerged. As they laid out the details, David's calm facade began to crumble. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming that the messages were taken out of context and that he and Olivia had simply argued as many couples do. But when Sergeant Vega mentioned Ruth's pregnancy, David's expression changed. The color drained from his face, and he became visibly agitated, pacing the room and avoiding eye contact. Realizing that the police had him cornered, David finally broke down. He confessed to the affair and admitted that on the night of Olivia's murder, he had lost control when she confronted him about the affair. After Ruth literally waved her positive pregnancy test in her infertile daughter's face, he panicked. In a fit of rage and desperation, he grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen counter and beat Olivia to death with it. He explained that he believed eliminating Olivia would somehow solve his problems, allowing him to start a new life with Ruth and their unborn child. The detectives arrested David on the spot, reading him his rights as they placed him in handcuffs. David offered no resistance, his head hung low in resignation as the police led him out of the house. Neighbors gathered on their porches, shocked to see the man they knew being taken away for such a brutal crime. The extended Carter family, devastated by the news, struggled to comprehend how their once loving husband and son-in-law could commit such a heinous act. For them, the arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey toward justice. David Carter's trial began on December 30th, 2019, at the Orange County Courthouse in Cedar Grove. The case quickly drew attention from local news outlets, and reporters lined up outside the courthouse, eager to cover every detail of the shocking murder case involving a respected financial advisor, his wife, and her mother. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Perez, a sharp prosecutor known for her methodical approach in the courtroom. Perez painted a chilling picture of David as a man driven to murder by the pressure of his affair with Ruth Breedlove and her unexpected pregnancy. She argued that David, unable to face the consequences of his actions, brutally killed Olivia in a desperate attempt to escape his crumbling life. Perez's case was built around the text messages recovered from David's phone, Ruth's pregnancy, and David's own confession to the police. On the other side, the defense attorney, Mark Caldwell, tried to portray David as a man under extreme emotional distress. Caldwell, known for his ability to sway juries with his empathetic approach, argued that David never intended to kill Olivia. Instead, Caldwell claimed that the crime was a tragic accident, the result of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. He urged the jury to consider David's previously clean record and the stress he was under at the time. Throughout the trial, Olivia's family sat in the courtroom, their grief palpable. They listened intently as witnesses took the stand, recounting the events leading up to Olivia's death. After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching a verdict. On January 7, 2020, David Carter was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that was met with relief from Olivia's family, who felt that justice had been served. The verdict brought some closure to Olivia's loved ones, but the emotional scars left by the crime would take much longer to heal. The case left the Cedar Grove community in shock, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can unravel. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. David Carter began his life sentence at the North Carolina Department of Public Safety's Central Prison, a stark contrast to the comfortable life he once knew. Behind bars, David had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led him to this point. His reputation in Cedar Grove was ruined, and he became a symbol of betrayal and deceit. Ruth Breedlove, reeling from the revelations that had come to light during the trial, found herself ostracized by the community. The affair with David, once a secret passion, was now public knowledge. Ruth moved out of Cedar Grove, seeking to start over in a new city where no one knew her story. However, the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of her daughter weighed heavily on her. The pregnancy, once a source of excitement, became a painful reminder of the destruction she had helped cause. Ruth ultimately decided to give the child up for adoption, believing it was the best way to ensure a better future. As the months passed, the story of Olivia Carter's murder became another tragic chapter in Cedar Grove's history. But for those who had known her, the loss was a wound that would never fully heal.